Hello all, and thank you for listening to another video of Mr. Laxton talking through these Algebra 2 notes. And today we are starting Chapter 10. Alright, so Chapter 10 is starting off kind of, they really put the ball on the tee for you again here in Chapter 10 in section 10.1. They were doing distance and midpoint formula. It's something that you guys have seen before. We're just going to kind of have to review this so we can talk about some distances and midpoints and how those are going to affect some of the conic sections actually that we started talking about in the rest of Chapter 10. We're going to talk about what those are in a few days. All right, so here we go. My essential question today is how do I find the distance and the midpoint of 2 points? Distance and midpoint, like I said, you guys have seen this before. We're just bringing this back to make sure that we know. All right, so distance formula, you have seen this before, but it'd be a good thing to highlight, circle it, do whatever you need to do so you can come back to that and make sure you know that. So this first example, it says find the distance between 2, -4 and -5, -1. So I still even like to do this for myself when I go through here. I like to label this as my x1, my y1, and my x2 and my y2. So now it's just as simple as, hey, just plugging it into this formula. So now my distance is the square root of my x2, which is -5, minus my x1, which is 2, square that, plus my y2, which is -1, minus my y1, which is -4, and square that. All right. Sometimes you got to be a little bit careful here where those double negatives and things like that happen. So this guy turns into the square root of what? -5 minus 2 is -7 squared, plus -1 minus a -4 is -1 plus 4, which is 3 squared. All right, so this turns out to be the square root of -7 squared is positive 49. Be careful there. That's a common mistake for people to make. -7 times -7 is positive 49. Plus 9, which is the square root of what? 58. All right, so you can have the square root of 58 if you want to make that into a decimal, that's okay. So, or I think it's like 7.616. If I remember right. So 7.616 is fine too. All right, but that square root of 58 is okay. All right, so kind of an application of these, the distance formula is kind of what we like to, a good way to start kind of reviewing this and go through. We're going to find out if some triangles are scaling, isosceles, and equilateral. All right, and you guys have talked about these in geometry. Going back to geometry now, scalene has none of the sides are the same length. All right, so none of them are the same length. And isosceles has 2 of the sides are the same length, and an equilateral, all or 3 of the sides have the same length. All right, awesome. So that's what we're going to do here in the second example. We're going to talk about, hey, is this triangle isosceles, scalene, or equilateral? Okay, so I'm just going to draw out kind of this example here, what we got for example number 2. So we have this point 2, -1. So that's over here. We have this point 4, 2, which is up here somewhere. And then we have the point 5, 0. So we have to find out, is this triangle right here, we have to find out, are all these sides the same? Are 2 of them the same, or are none of them the same? Okay, so really what we have to do is we have to do the distance formula 3 times to find out what these points are. So let's go here. Let's use these 2 points first. Let's use an x1, a y1, an x2, and a y2 to go through this distance formula. So I can even call these, I think, A, B, and C. So this is A, B, and C. So we're going to first find the distance of AB. All right, and that is the square root of what? We have 4 minus 2 squared plus 2 minus a -1 squared. All right, so go through here. 4 minus 2 is going to be 2 squared, which is 4, plus 3 squared, which is 9. So this turns out to be the square root of 13. Okay, so that's what this distance is here, is the square root of 13. We have to find, is that the same or different than all these guys? So now I want to find BC, so let's find that. So now I got to go BC. You use now these points here. So it is the square root of your x's minus, so 5 minus 4 squared, plus my y's minus is 0 minus 2 squared. And here this is going to be 1 squared, which is 1, plus 2 squared, which is 4. This is the square root of 5. So this is the square root of 5 right there. And my last one, I have to find c to a. So now I'm going to use this point and this point. So now my c to a, my x's minus from each other is going to be 5 minus 2 squared, and my y's minus from each other is going to be 0 minus a negative 1 squared. So this is going to be what? This is going to be 3 squared, which is 9, and I didn't write that other step out, but now I have 1 squared, so this is going to be 9 plus 1, which is the square root of 10. So this is the square root of 10. So now you have to ask yourself, what type of a triangle is this? It's a scalene. They have none of the sides are the same, so this is a scalene. All right, awesome, perfect. Okay, here we go. For the next one, midpoint formula is just this. So if you want to highlight that in for yourself there, it's you add the x's together and divide them by 2. All right. So we average the x's. Average x's. And then we're going to average the y's. All right, so we're going to take the average, so we're going to add them all together, divide by how many they are, which is 2. So we're going to add those y's together and divide by 2 to find that midpoint. So here we go, just a little drawing for yourself here. If you have these points A, B, the point that's directly in between those is the midpoint. All right, you guys have seen that before, nothing too crazy. So here we go. For the midpoint, you have 2 points. So your midpoint is not just like a square root answer. It's not going to be a distance. It's going to be an actual point that's in the middle of these guys. All right, so your midpoint, you have to add your x's together. So I add my x's, so I go 6 plus 2, and I divide them by 2. And then you have to add your y's together in the second one. So I have negative 2 plus negative 9 divided by 2. So 6 plus 2 is 8 divided by 2. And then this guy is going to be what? Negative 11 divided by 2. You can leave some different answers here. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then negative 11 divided by 2, that's going to be a fraction. If you want to leave it as negative 11 divided by 2, I'm okay with that. If you want to turn it into 5.5, that's okay too. Either way works. And that's a negative 5.5. All right, awesome. So that is distance midpoint. Like I said, I didn't want to take a whole lot of time on that. You guys have seen that in Algebra 1. You've seen it in geometry, so you've seen it a bunch of times. I just wanted to make sure we review that before we get into the rest of Chapter 10. So again, thank you for listening, and have a good rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening.